these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger LIVECAST.
Good afternoon, Amsterdam, and good evening, Shanghai. Welcome to the 6th livecast of Infected Cities. These series are created by DutchCulture and Pakhuis de Zwijger. I am Zoe Papaikonomou, and I am your host today. In this weekly series, we focus on different cities that are hit by corona crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has an enormous impact worldwide on vital areas of our lives, such as employment, healthcare, and social services. This program will specifically zoom in on the cultural sector and ask the question how cultural professionals are looking for creative and social solutions to the current pandemic. Today, we will talk about the impact of COVID-19 on Shanghai. We will talk about how the pandemic is currently impacting cultural organizations, society, artists, and more. So for our audience, we have a very interesting program filled with many guests zooming in from Shanghai. But I first have a few general remarks. Thank you very much for joining us via live stream on Facebook and the Pakhuis de Zwijger website. If you want to participate or ask questions, you can do this via Zoom. You can use the chat option or the Q&A. In the chat option, you can chat with visitors amongst each others. And with the Q&A, you can send in questions, and I will do my best to ask your questions for you to our esteemed guests today. So, some background information on Shanghai. Shanghai is the largest city in China in terms of population. Shanghai is also the largest municipality in the world, with over 24 million inhabitants. The corona numbers. Shanghai has only 660 detected COVID-19 infections. And 7 people have died as a result of the virus. The city went into lockdown early this year and has been slowly reopening since the end of February. So we will start this livecast with a conversation about the current situation in Shanghai. Then we will continue with a talk about the social situation in Shanghai. We will also talk about corona and tech. And in the last part, we will of course also talk about the impact of corona on the art sector of Shanghai. So it's time to introduce our first two guests. Tabitha Spilman, a former correspondent for several Dutch newspapers and currently finishing her PhD. And Frank Tsai, a civil society organizer. Welcome both, zooming in from Shanghai. It's very good to have you here. So Frank, to start with you, you are American Chinese and have been living in Shanghai for many years now. You work as a civil society organizer, and before you worked at the Economist Intelligence Unit. Could you tell us about the situation in Shanghai right now? And what has been your experience in the past months?
Sure. Well, I'll start with my experience a bit. So, as many of your audience probably knows, the virus struck during Chinese New Year, so many people went abroad or traveled during that time, and many foreigners like myself were deciding whether or not to come back to China. So I came back to China February 22nd, which is actually the exact in the bars and restaurants opening again. So in all, you had about 3 weeks in Shanghai.
Frank, your Wi-Fi is playing up a bit.
Nothing was open. So it's slower.
Yeah, so we cannot catch everything you're saying. To be sure, maybe we should move to Tabitha for a bit to see if it gets better. I will back with you within a few minutes. Thanks.
Okay.
So Tabitha, could you please explain a bit to us in Amsterdam what kind of context we need if we talk about Shanghai, also if we talk about the impact of COVID-19? We don't have sound, Tabitha. Oh, there you are.
Sorry about that.
No, but we can hear you loud and clear now. Thank you. Also, I see Frank is also moving again. So after this question, I will come back to you, Frank. So to make sure, Tabitha, the question was, so for us in Amsterdam now, could you give some context about Shanghai and also the impact of corona crisis?
Well, in general, I think Shanghai has been impacted fairly mildly, as you already said. Not that, luckily, not that many infections have happened here, and a big reason for that is the early lockdown right after Wuhan's lockdown at the end of January. Economic life and creative life has really shut down for a few months. But other than that, I think compared to the lockdown itself was in severity perhaps similar to that in Holland, where people are still allowed to go out for walks and basic necessities, but we're not working at the office and things like that. Yes, overall, the number of cases have been a lot lower, but the lockdown levels and the economic impact have been perhaps, not that different from Holland.
Thank you, Tabitha. So, Frank, we're going to try again. Frank Tsai, civil society organizer and formerly of the Economist Intelligence Unit. So you were just about to explain about the situation, to give a sketch of the situation of Shanghai right now and how you have experienced it yourself the past few months.
Sure. If we have difficulties again, I'll turn my camera off. I'll try it now, and if there's a problem, just let me know, okay?
Sure.
So as for Shanghai right now, things are just about back to normal. I was saying before that I arrived back in Shanghai in late February, right when bars and restaurants opened again. So we've had these things open for many months now. From talking to people, retailers, business is down. Taxi drivers report business down 30%. Restaurants are still down, but you see crowds in the street. You see maybe half the people wearing masks now, and this kind of thing. So I would agree with what Tabitha said, except maybe I would amend something and just say that. I don't think it's accurate to say we will lock down. I think that's actually inaccurate because we can always leave our homes. I understand that term as meaning you can't leave your home. There was never a fine for leaving your home. What your audience also needs to know, though, is that there's a lot of security in entering and leaving your complex. So even now, there's temperature checking for my complex. There was temperature checking for bars and restaurants for a very long time that ended, depending on the place, about a month ago. So, one way in which China was more relaxed, or Shanghai, I should say, because many parts of China were locked down, especially Hubei province. But one way when Shanghai was more relaxed than, say, New York City, where I'm from, is that you could always leave your home. There's no problem with no sanctions for leaving it. But it was less relaxed in that there was a lot of checking of temperatures. And if you think about why China was able to control this, basically, if you had a temperature, you'd go to the hospital. So, if something happened, they'd catch cases right away. So that's kind of the point I want to make about that.
So, and I'm also curious because, as a civil society organizer, you host all kinds of lecture events on various topics. Could you tell us also a little bit about that? And also maybe if you have organized lectures that are in relation to COVID-19?
Sure. So, as a lecture organizer, I do about 2 large lectures a week now. And so I kind of have my pulse on that part of society here. I opened my first lecture after the guide on May, actually, and I'm of course very careful not to risk myself here and not do anything that the authorities don't approve of. But I was the first large organizer to start events again. And my cue was that live music was starting. So basically, live music didn't start again. It was not allowed again until early May. And when that happened, basically, I was told that I'd be okay to host events. So to answer your question, I've done a few events on the kind of like virus impact on Chinese society and economy. One was on consumers, how they're reacting, how they're changing because of the virus. And we just had one recently about how work will change in China. That was actually WeWork speaking on that. So people are kind of virus out, to be honest, because it's been a very long time. But there's still some demand for hearing talks about the virus. People go out more, too. I've noticed that because they were cooped up for so long, I find that my attendance is quite high because people were so tired of being cooped up and having nowhere to go.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's also interesting for us here in Amsterdam because we have just started. Actually, when you opened up, we started closing. We started our lockdown here. So it's also interesting to have like a glimpse into what could possibly be also our future a little bit, although in a smaller city. So Tabitha, I'm also curious to go back to you. You wrote an article about your perspective on the corona crisis in China, but it was more... the article was about the biased and one-sided view of China in the Netherlands, in Dutch media. Can you explain a bit about your article?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I do think that Dutch media in general do quite a good job reporting on China. But just like as for any country, like the news will focus on only certain events, and often a lot of the context and some of the other dimensions of life can be missing, and that's like important for any country. But as China is becoming a country that becomes more important in public discourse in Holland as well, I guess I was just trying to make the point that perhaps there's a bit of that it would be worth investing in some resources to do a bit of catching up on that and to try to gain a more like multidimensional understanding both of the Chinese state and society. And the debate around the virus was a bit of make me think about that, because it was a bit of an illustration of that. So, for instance, the outbreak in Wuhan was really reported as a political story, a story of how the Chinese government at first covered up the virus, and then later it became about this, propaganda between the U.S. and China and different ways of framing it. So it was very much politics only, which is a dominant lens because, of course, the Chinese system is so different from the European. So it makes sense in a way, but it also leaves out a lot because, of course, it was, in fact, a really important public health story that Europe needed to start preparing for immediately. It was also a civil society story. It was a globalization story. So when for the U.S., which is often the other country that's mentioned when China is mentioned now, we have more context, and we know that, well, when the president says something we don't like that doesn't necessarily represent the country, or when something happens in one part of the U.S., it might be very different in another part. So that kind of context for China, we still, for obvious reasons, lack a little bit. So, yeah, actually, I think the kind of events like this, where you just really focus on one city, one sector, is exactly the kind of thing that we need. If you know a lot about just the creative sector in Shanghai and how it's a complex city with all kinds of migrants, and maybe it's comparable in some ways to Rotterdam or to certain American cities, well, then it only, then you have some sort of grounding point, and then suddenly it also makes sense to say, well, maybe the politics in that city would also be a bit different, right? Or certain priorities might be different from Beijing or from Wuhan or from another Chinese city. So I guess that's what I was trying to do in that article. Yeah.
So and that's very interesting. I think it's a good comparison because there's so much knowledge in the Netherlands about the states, and this in-depth knowledge, which is, I guess, definitely lacking if we talk about China. Frank, could you maybe also give some perspective on how the measures and the policies are different between Shanghai and other parts of China?
Well, maybe I'll go a bit more on why China differs from the West or how it's
Sure.
succeeded, because I think I know more about that. I think a lot of people are saying these days, whether in China or in the West as well, these Chinese people really, they're very collectivist. They really follow rules, and we're going to beaches and we're partying, and that's why we have the virus. And I think that's not totally accurate. That's not even close to being totally accurate. There's something there, and I kind of want to explain that. So I'd mentioned before that we did not experience a strict lockdown in our homes, but there were many, many people checking temperature. That happens because in many buildings, you have people volunteering to do that. These people are neighborhood committees of the Communist Party, often older people. There are 100 million party members in China. The party seeps into society in this way. It's a characteristic of the state, Leninist state like China. And so that makes it very different from other countries. The state is able to mobilize all these people, volunteering, in fact, to protect their own communities and buildings. And I think that explains one reason why so many cases are caught through temperature checking. And that makes it different from the West. There are ways in which China is not different. China experienced SARS, so did South Korea, so did Hong Kong and Taiwan and Singapore. They did well as well. So it's not always because you have a so-called strong state here and you have democracies elsewhere. So that was part of it as well. So there are many factors, but I think one that should be highlighted is just the way the state does seep into society with that very strong 100 million party members that can help. We would say help in this kind of crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for adding that. Also for our perspective, so how are the measures right now in Shanghai? What is going, because a lot of things are already have reopened and are going to reopen again. What is in the near future? Is it going back to? Is it almost normal again, or is that still a long way to go?
I feel in terms of social life, nightlife, it is normal now. There's reluctance on the part of consumers to go out, but you're allowed to do things. And there are parties, there are events, and I'm in that world. I also know the business world too. I mean, the kind of like the events in the business world, chambers or other organization that holds events, and many of those are still online. I think partly because they don't want to be perceived as risking people's safety, but they're allowed to do events in person now.
So thank you very much, Tabitha Speelman and Frank Tsai. Frank, you will stay with us, and we will talk with you a little bit later on, but thank you for now. So we will move on to talk about urban planning and the city landscape. And joining us for that is Mark Dekker, architect and urbanist, also director of Asia Inbo International, Chen Wing, cultural producer and curator, and Charlene Leeuw, engineer, social change maker and community leader, also co-founder of Ladies Who Tag and Shanghai Pride. Chen, to start with you, great that you are here. You are a Shanghai-based cultural producer and curator, and you had a prize-winning project initiating a mutual aid society. We are very glad that you are in the program today. So can you tell us a little bit more about your work and the project, the Mutual Aid Society project?
Yes, and hi everyone. So I'm born and raised in Shanghai. So my main education was also here to the college. If possible, I can go through some photos, images that can tell you the story a little bit better to bring you some aspects of the city as I approach it. So since 2014, 2015, at that time I started a group, a collective, but it's a very loose, self-organized collective called Dinghaiqiao Mutual Aid Society. And it is located, can we see the photo, the first photo? It is located in the old industrial area, working class neighborhood in northeast Shanghai Yangpu district, which is a very populous, at least till now, a populous working class and migrant workers community. So after the virus, the situation is getting a little bit better. So I recently revisited the community again. Can you show the first photo called 1 Dinghai Road, June 3rd?
Is that
Is the photo?
I don't know. I'm looking up right now. Oh yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So it is now sometimes called a slum area, but it's a very self-built, self-organized community, bottom-up kind of historical neighborhood, has a history of more than 100 years old. But like any part of the kind of old communities in Shanghai, it's also under the possibility, and people are mostly looking forward to a relocation project and a demolishing of this old texture. So when I go visit the street market there, because the whole community, like any old community, is developed surrounding one street market, as we can find in the first slide. And I didn't see the photo here, but I can go on talking.
But we are definitely seeing them, Chen. So please continue, but we are seeing them.
Good. Okay, so you can find that this street is narrow, but it's very cheap if you rent a booth there. So what I found amazing is that after this whole it's a very disastrous for small businesses in the city level, in the street level. Most of the vendors and the shopkeepers, they are still running the business quite okay. So they are not turning it to, like, they are not cease to renew their rent, as like you will find in many parts of Shanghai, especially where the rent is higher. And at the end of this street, you will find the high-rises, which is going to be the next version of the city. So in the past few years, what we have been doing is that although we are not a self-acclaimed urbanist, we are witnessing this. And we, from different backgrounds, we try to make our own understandings of this past 10, 20 years of urban renew. And what does that mean to a city like Shanghai? What does that mean to our right to the city, especially the right to the street? Next slide, you will find that today, just next door to where our small community locates, it's under this whole area, the next neighborhood. You will find these white suit people. They are from the real estate agencies. And because this whole community next door is going to be demolished, so these people are already there to sell the real estates to these people, because they will, out of this relocation, get a sum of money. Using this sum of money, they can purchase real estates. So this transformation is going on right now. So if we look at the next slide, this is about the street vendors. So the main policy has now suddenly changed in the past few days, because the Chinese premier said that we need street vendors again after so many years of trying to get rid of the street vendors, especially in the major cities like Beijing, Shanghai. So in 2016, while we collectively curated the section for the Shanghai Biennale, 11th Shanghai Biennale, and there's one architect, a female architect. So I invited her to record 51 street vendors in the year 2016. And she ended up only managed to document by drawing them and talking to them. Next slide, in this kind of pictures with some text about their stories. But she only managed to work out 39, because at that time there's one movement from the local government level to get rid of these street vendors, whatever. So there's no license, there's no possibility, there's no chance for them to be legal. So they have to disappear. And next slide is also about this a disappearing market street. And just 1 month after she recorded this street market, the street market was becoming just ruins, like the close-by neighborhoods. And the next slide also is a street vendor who is repairing bikes. And if I can continue. Sure. I would really like to introduce one artist who is a photographer. I know him because he has been recording the history of Shanghai since late 70s, early 80s to now. He retired last year, but he still although he used to work for a formal newspaper as a journalist, but he still go on taking photos more than needed, and he's still publicizing them. So throughout this coronavirus, he has been in Shanghai and he has been recording with his camera all kinds of phenomena as he sees from it. And I think he's one of the best living photojournalists in Shanghai, from Shanghai. So the first photo in black and white we will find is, so I just pick up some of his photos and go through them very quickly.
Yeah.
So the first one was from March the 23rd, which is at the high time of the coronavirus period. But you find two people who are looking into a window with some information about the relocation, demolition and relocation. So they are still, so even in this kind of a crisis, the demolition project, the relocation demolition project is still going on. And these two people in the middle of the night, they come out and they want to figure out more. So this year in Shanghai, there will be 28,000 households that will be relocated from mostly the city center to the outskirts of the city, and some sections, including the section that I mentioned earlier, will be demolished. So the old neighborhood is still disappearing with a lowered speed. And the second is in Tianzifang, is in April the 2nd. So he went to Tianzifang is one of the most popular tourist destinations now in Shanghai, which is in an old-styled Li Long, which is like an old lane in the French concession. So it has been so popular that the ground level has all been now rent for small businesses. And that day, Yonghe, who is the name of the photographer, Mr. Yonghe went to visit one of the shops, and she almost burst into tears. She is almost crying when he buy one piece of wood, saying something like good wishes. So this craft. So she said that she has no business for so long, and she's just feeling very sad. And next slide is April 25th. It's in the supermarket where the kids, because now it has been so long that 4 or 5 months since the Chinese New Year, all kids are kept at home. And by end of April, kids want to go to the street, go to their parks. If there's still any public parks close by, they want to go to the open air. So now the bicycle is becoming very, very popular. So he's also recording that moment. But the question is, what kind of street life that is going to be resumed for the kids for Shanghai? And the next slide is about a factory, which is one of the very typically manufacturing industry, who is electronic company factory, who employed in March 30,000 workers, because once they know that they will recover, they recruited in 5 days 30,000 workers. But because there's no international orders anymore, so all these workers is now packed up and go back to their hometown. And he talked to one of the workers, asking her, why don't you spend 1 or 2 days more in Shanghai and play and enjoy yourself a little bit? And the worker replied that there's nothing, absolutely nothing for her to enjoy in this city. So there's nothing to play with. She'd better go back to her hometown and find whatever she can do back there. So the kind of, although we say that entertaining is coming back, the life is coming back to Shanghai, but there's different life for different people, and there are many invisible life, and life that is only meaningful in terms of work for many people, especially migrant workers. And the fifth photo, next one from Yonghe, is an installation, which is a doll made of sculpture, in a public sculpture in one of the shopping malls. But the head of the doll is a coronavirus kind of thing. So it's funny that people are now, it's not only one sculpture, there are a couple of public sculptures by malls. They're now using coronavirus as a symbol to welcome people back to the mall. It's a very ironic and also very controversial scene, but people are looking at it, and people are hesitating at the same time, and the malls are also trying to recover as much as possible. And yesterday we heard the very sad news that one of the main figures in the Chinese film industry, who's running many chain cinemas, committed suicide yesterday because the lockdown has made the films, especially cinema industry, suffered so much. And on the next slide, the 6th is in Shanghai Road, which is the kind of higher class shopping street in Shanghai. So many famous shops are closed, and this time maybe forever. And 7th, the next slide, is an old lady that just echo what Frank had just said. She is she is from the neighborhood, and she has been checking temperatures at this tent in the past 3 months for more than 100 days by the end of May. And she said that she is very proud that the situation now in Shanghai is getting so well, and the kindergarten is reopened again, which means that the city will be normalized. So once the kindergarten is reopened, then it means that we have all recovered. And she's very proud of her work, and she is very typical of the kind of grassroots people, either Communist Party members or not, but who as volunteers or not, assign this job or not, or just volunteered, they are very devoted and they believe in the kind of things they are doing. But at the same time, if you look at the background, so the street scene behind her is a demolishing and reconstruction scene. It's very typical of the city center. So everywhere is now recovering also the demolishing, relocation, and the reconstruction of a more proper, quoted proper city. And the very last, the 8th photo from Yonghe was taken just a couple of days ago on June the 6th. So it is in the Bund, on the Bund. And the Bund is regarded as like the iconic place of Shanghai with very high-class boutique shops and financial centers, financial businesses, banks, world level. Once people heard from news that even the Prime Minister is encouraging people to be street vendors and create their own opportunities for living. This lady came out because she is an amateur, what we call, so she can introduce families for their marriage. So now there's a big, it's now also very urban and very typically of major another kind of family crisis in Chinese main cities like Shanghai, that they want to marry the daughter and the son out of the family properly. So she is doing this business by introducing different families to each other and either possible marriage. It's like a traditional arranged marriage thing, but it's in a very contemporary way of doing things. So she is also doing the street vendor, saying that she can do this job. But then immediately she is asked to leave. And then what she replied is that, didn't you know that there's a spirit from above? So this is the literal translation, which means that you know that even the central government, the prime minister, has encouraged us to do this. But while she was saying this, pointing above the sky, as if there's someone high in the sky who is giving her this right to the street to do whatever she can on the street. The local people who are arranging the street yesterday just learned also this news today, and they don't know how to digest this, how to give a new order to this, because this is just a very abstract spirit meaning that it's a saying, but it's very powerful. But how can we receive it, and how can we reorganize ourselves in ideological level and in operational level is another thing. So the local street level government, they are also struggling about what they have been thinking is a proper way of working on the street and street vendoring the street, which is no longer familiar because they have cleared out the street vendors for so long. They are not used to being equally talking to the street vendors again. So I think this echoes to what I have been observing since 2016. And I think it is very interesting that these things is coming back like immediately after a crisis. And it gives us a perspective to look into our daily life in Shanghai and the power structure here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chen, for giving this insight. It was really also very interesting to see those pictures. Thank you so much. I will come back to you later on. I would like also to introduce Mark Dekker into the conversation. Mark Dekker is architect and urbanist and director of Asia Imbo International. And you're from the Netherlands, Mark. So you have been living in Shanghai since 2012. What made you move to Shanghai?
As most people, I think it's for work. And the moment I arrived in Shanghai, I loved it a lot, mainly because of what I would describe as an organized chaos. The energy in the city surprised me. Every day is different. The spontaneity of life, and also 24 hours a day, everything can be arranged on super short notice. So this is a kind of energy that really, felt very good for me. Also, the fact that every day is different made me, let's say, rejuvenate or reinvent myself and my business every day again. So it gives a lot of energy. That's the reason why I came.
So and how did you experience living through the COVID-19 measures in Shanghai?
Well, there was actually quite a shock. I was in Netherlands for 2 weeks during the Spring Festival, and I wanted to return to Shanghai. And most of my friends, my family, and my colleagues said, like, why you want to go back? Because, there's something happening there. Maybe you should stay in Netherlands. And I was like, no, because Shanghai is my home. So I need to go back. This is where I belong. So no matter what happens there, I have to go back home. But the moment I arrived, of course, I noticed that the city is completely different from what I have experienced until that moment. The energy that I've always felt was kind of like in a hidden underground layer. It was there, but it was far away. Streets were empty. Hardly any people on the street. If there were people on the street, they were wearing masks. For me, it was almost like a war feeling. You're in a war zone. In my compound, people would walk around me in a big circle. We would never join together in one elevator. Everything was closed. Only the local supermarket was open. And if I wanted to enter the supermarket, I had to go through the temperature check, show my QR health code. And then inside there were people in white suits with screens in front of their faces. It was really, for me, it was really like a war zone, and totally not that spontaneous anymore. I mean, you had to plan things in advance. You cannot see people anymore. So it was very different. That was quite some difference than what I was used to. Yeah.
So, and we just heard the very interesting presentation of Chen and the very beautiful and insightful pictures she brought with her. I'm curious, can you respond from your perspective as an urban planner and architect to her presentation?
Well, I see different things. Also, Frank also mentioned a bit. I saw also that the public space is used in a different way. Huh? So for instance, in our compound, nobody could enter the compound anymore. So also all the delivery guys, the mail guys cannot enter the compound anymore. So the public space around me changed into like a sea of packages. In my street, they don't have the open compounds where they can deliver everything inside the gate. No, everything was on the street. So the public space was completely different. Another thing, what I saw in more as the way how it's organized. I think in Netherlands people don't understand what Frank already mentioned a bit, that it's a lot of volunteers taking care of their community. So in Shanghai, it's organized in the community. The community has kind of responsibility to help to retain, or let's say not spread the virus. So every community has to take their own responsibility. The volunteers take responsibility, and of course, this is not always everywhere the same. But in my case, I think the two communities I'm part of, so one community of my residents and one community of my office, were extremely helpful. I could call them every day to ask, what is the rules for the quarantine today? Can I go out? Can I not go out? How long? Also, when the quarantine was over, Where can I travel? Every day they could give me up-to-date information, which was very useful. In opposite to what happened to me in Netherlands beginning January, when I went to my local doctor, he didn't know anything. Then I called the GGD, didn't know anything. So I had nowhere to go with any of my questions. Here, because it's organized in smaller clusters, you have it right at your doorstep. And I also feel it made me know my community much better. So I know the management of our building much better. I know the doorman. I know, so I know my neighbors of the same floor. I'm living in a 32 floor tower. So it also brings us much together. And when we are opening up, you see the people in the beginning, they trust maybe their families, and then later on their friends, and then later maybe their floor, and then the building. And now I think we are at a point that everybody, is kind of like free and trusts the whole compound again. But I do believe that this event made us realize that organizing things in a bigger and bigger way, and more people makes it also difficult to control. So I have the feeling that we have a need to also organize better in a more human scale, a more community scale, so that when these kind of events happen, it's easier to oversee, overlook, and control, and also have a better feeling that in which environment you are.
So and from the perspective, your company Imbo International is a Dutch architecture firm, and you have opened office in Shanghai. What can you contribute as Dutch architects in Shanghai, also in the light of what you have just told us?
Yeah, so in Netherlands, I think we have a long history of making communities. Our scale is a lot smaller. Huh? I mean, Netherlands is a relatively small scale project compared to China. But we have a good sense of how to make a community, so community scale and human scale, to bring human scale in the project, and also to have a kind of like a organized social coherence and social safety, social security, let's say, in a self-evident way inside our work. And I think in China, with the ever-growing size of projects, or it seems like, let's say, the big projects here, I think there's a big task for us to, together with this kind of local community structure, to somehow shape that and contribute our way of thinking in communities and bring that kind of scale into the building or the big building structures. I think there's a big task there to organize these kind of organized communities, smaller communities in the bigger scale.
Thank you so much, Mark Dekker, also for joining us and sharing your insights. So we are also very happy that is joining us Shailene Liu, especially because I've introduced you earlier, but you are also the co-founder of Shanghai Pride. And you are the Pride is happening in 2 days on Saturday. So thank you so much for taking the time, because you must be very busy. So could you tell us about what's happening on Pride, Shanghai Pride 2020?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on this panel and to share a little bit more about what's happening in Shanghai post-COVID-19. Yes. Saturday is our first day of Shanghai Pride 2020, and this year we are celebrating our 12th festival. And I think some of our friends in the panel, you've either heard of Shanghai Pride or you've been to one of those events that we host. So in May, actually, last month on the 17th, we actually commemorated International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, by organizing a bike ride. So you can see, in the next 2 photos up there, that we had actually 6 teams. I'm showing the orange team because it's more related to our friends in Netherlands. We actually have 6 teams riding across the city of Shanghai and then meeting to form the colorful rainbow pride, as you can see in the group photo there. So that's in May, but coming up in June, we have 18 events, and the first one is actually the Pride Job Fair. Now, this Pride Job Fair is actually to showcase companies that are inclusive, companies that value diversity in their companies. And then, of course, we have other events such as the workplace diversity forums, and then forums that are related to like mental health, marriage equality, and so on. Not forgetting, of course, Pride is also about having fun. We have the Pink Party coming up the second weekend. So everybody is invited. It's really a community event. We get together people who are from the LGBT community, people who are allies, companies that are inclusive, other communities across China. So we get together just to celebrate basically diversity in Shanghai. And you see, when we say Pink Party, we really mean pink. Of course, we also have other sports events like the run. The run is quite popular. This year, we had to reduce the number of participants significantly, and I think I'll explain that later. So there's the run, and we also have the culture program, right? Culture program includes the film festival. So on Saturday, the next weekend, we have film screening. We're going to film screens throughout the day. Again, everyone is welcome. Not to forget also, because of the COVID-19, we have put the longer series of film screenings to a much later date. So hopefully in August, we will have that. And we will also have the art show.
Because you already said that there are still some restrictions organizing the Pride at this time. Can you tell us a little bit about the restrictions because of COVID-19?
I think like in everywhere else, social distancing is still very much a routine, very much a daily part of daily life. So the challenges are we really have to reduce the number of participants in every event, right? And normally we would allow anyone to walk in into forums or art shows and so on. But this year, we require everybody to pre-register on the online platform before attending each event. So we know like who's coming and how many people are there at a selected time. So we have time slots for like a 1 hour time slot or 30-minute time slot for people to sign up for. That way we know that the number of people are in control, under control, and within the venue capacity limit. And then, of course, we will have multiple screening and checks before allowing everybody to get into the venue.
So maybe for our audience in the Netherlands, could you tell a little bit about how homosexuality is seen in Chinese society?
Sure. I have this page about the status overview. In general, right, homosexuality, being LGBT is not a crime. It's been decriminalized in 1997, and it's been taken away from the mental health disorder list in 2001. But of course, when it comes to social everyday life, there are some, I wouldn't say, but a little bit of challenges or views that are different, right? It is said that there are about 5% of the population is LGBT. So actually that's a lot of people, if you want to put it that way. And then while the laws are not directly for LGBT, there are also no laws against LGBT. Of course, the parade, you don't see a parade here. Unlike in Amsterdam, we have the Canal Parade, but we do get to organize other activities, such as the ones that are coming up for Pride. And then normally it is like when we talk about LGBT, normally it's through HIV/AIDS prevention that the topic of LGBT actually comes up. Right, and if you see the next page, the issues that the community face is basically on family and society pressure, right? Whether you should get married, have your kids, start a family. So these are really some pressures that are very common to the community. And arranged marriages are very common, very popular. I mean, we don't really encourage that, but it does happen. And then, of course, through HIV and AIDS also, some people get discriminated against, or there is some sort of bias. Of course, we are trying to change all that. That's why we organize Shanghai Pride. I'd like to touch on a little bit about, I think there was maybe, I have not talked about the collaboration with the Netherlands. The Consulate General in Shanghai is very supportive of Shanghai Pride and of the community. So last year, Mr. Remco van Wijngaarden came to two of our events, actually. He opened for us the Pride Art Gallery in June last year, and also attended some of our film festival events.
Oh yeah, that's good to know. Thank you so much. And also, before we're going to the next part of the program, because I really want to know about Ladies Who Tech, because you're also a co-founder of this organization. Can you explain a little bit about Ladies in Tech? Ladies Who Tech, sorry.
So Ladies Who Tech is also another community platform, and our mission is really to close the gender gap and to increase gender diversity in science, technology, engineering, mathematics industry in Asia. So we have done a few events as well, and the one that's coming up next week also will be in collaboration with a couple of corporations. One is going to be offline, and one is going to be online. And then in August, we will have the Ladies Who Tech convention, where we will gather communities and also of entrepreneurs, speakers who are women in tech and who are role models in STEM industries. And of course, again, we have the Consulate General here of the Netherlands supporting this initiative.
That's great. So, Shailene, you're staying with us for the next part of our program. We're going to talk about new technology, and this is also a hot topic in the Netherlands right now. Everybody is talking about the app. Are we going to have an app? Are we not going to have an app concerning detection of COVID-19? So Shailene is still with us. Also, Frank Tsai is coming back into the conversation. And also in this conversation is Vitas Jankauskas, head of research of the Kronos Art Center. So China has been recognized in its advancement with digital development. For example, cashless payment, facial recognition, the super app WeChat, 5G infrastructure. And as I said before, in the Netherlands, people are debating on the Corona app right now, especially on its safety in protecting personal information and privacy. While in Shanghai, same as in other cities across China, the Shanghai QR code, among other health monitoring apps, and Mark already said something about it, has been implemented as a certain kind of health certificate based on big data analysis. So Shailene, you're still with us. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Shanghai QR code?
Well, if you have a picture of that up there, sure. So it's actually very simple, and I found it very simple, right? When I came back in March, just before borders closed, I came back from Malaysia to Shanghai, and then I was told that I have to show a green QR code. And first of all, I was very hesitant, like, where am I going to find this QR code? How do people know that I'm green or not? So it's actually very simple. As long as you have an Alipay, I use the Alipay app. It's the payment app that's very popular here and very commonly used in China. And there is a button that you just press that says health. Then it will show that whether you have green QR code or not. And what it does is, because Alipay is tied to your identification card, and in my case is the passport number, where I have to show I have the key in my passport number before that, and I have to show that I have to hold up my passport with my face and take a photo. So it's all about identification and information that's already in the system. And they knew, because I come in using my passport, So it has that information that I came in already to China at a certain date and where I came in from. So when I show up and turn on my phone and was like, whoa, okay, it's green. It's great. It's really easy to use, and a lot of the buildings that when you enter, you actually have to show that. And I'm very surprised. Everybody is really strict about it. Even for myself, I find that it's very helpful because I can know whether I'm safe. I can know if other people are safe when they go into a certain place.
Thank you. So also Vitas Jankauskas has joined us in the program from the Kronos Art Center. Vitas, welcome to the program. Very good to have you here. Can you maybe introduce yourself and your work a little bit?
So my name is Vitas. I run a small lab at the Kronos Art Center, which is China's first not-for-profit for media art or sort of technology-oriented art. And the lab here is mainly focused on sort of creative research. And we engage into that through just creative projects, tech-based creative projects. We also hold artist residencies, so invite international artists to participate. And then we run quite a big chunk of the public program at Kronos Art Center, which is usually, again, related to technology in a critical way, whether that would be talks with guest artists, the creative community in Shanghai, or just sort of workshops for either educative purposes about general technology or sort of exploring creative tools.
So, and what would you say that, what would you, in your perspective, what are the pros and cons of these kind of health apps?
Oh, yeah. Well, the first thing is that there's a lot of speculation about what's going to happen with the health app, so whether it's going to stay after the virus is gone or not. And there's various proposals about what to do with it coming from different cities. So I think Chengdu, if I'm not mistaken, was the first one to propose that it should stay and track additional information, and then maybe we could expand the features of it. Pros and cons, I don't know. I think so when I arrived to China in March, I actually entered the country on the first day when they decided to do quarantine. So I had to quarantine myself still at home. I didn't have to go to a hotel because, anyway, and it was quite nice because so immediately, as the others mentioned, the community representatives came to my house, and then I had to meet a special nurse that was responsible for my quarantine. And it was quite funny because they couldn't enter in my compound because it's locked at the ground level. So I had to go down, and then they were wearing hazmat suits, because I might be infected. And it was quite funny because after that, I remember, I live on a street which has quite a lot of expensive cars, and so it was the middle of the night. They arrived very late, and I had to sign some paperwork, and we did it on. So two nurses in hazmat suits made me sign those documents on the back of a Porsche car, that was just randomly parked in the street. And so we signed the papers, and then they gave me a mercury thermometer that I had to use twice a day and report. And I remember I added, the nurse asked me to add her on WeChat, and it was quite nice also because she had this little picture with a penguin on it, with the little winter cap, and it was quite nice. And every day I would submit my temperature, and she would send emojis as I say, oh yeah, cool, you're going through this, not a lot left. And then the health code came in later, which felt a lot less personal, and it just felt like it's a code, and every time you go, you show it. It's a bit of a lottery. It gets updated whenever you scan it, at any other day. So then I have to always use it here because the Kronos Art Center is part of M50, which is a creative area here in Shanghai. So it's a touristic spot. So there is a check. And and it's kind of, I don't know, I felt it much less personal. I preferred, having a nurse to talk to and sending me emojis than having a QR code. So that was kind of a personal perspective. And then the other thing is, I say that So there's something when when such apps get widely discussed, when they get released. I remember in Australia when it got released, there was a lot of people trying to figure out the code behind it and sort of to see whether it was secure and whether people using it were actually, whether their data was protected. Whereas here, some of these conversations do not happen or happen less due to various reasons. So I think that the app's functionality is also kind of reflecting that at certain stages and the way it works. And yeah, I just think that I was kind of laughing with one of my colleagues saying that, if this app was introduced in the West first, there would have been a lot of discussion about it, and there would have been features that would have been introduced thanks to this whole big conversation, whereas here it's kind of a top-down approach. So that app is quite simple, it works, but the development of it and obviously the transparency of the data is another question.
Thank you, Vitas. Frank, you're also still with us. So what's your experience with the Shanghai QR code? Oh, you have to put your sound on, Frank.
Well, I'm positive I am in the minority, but it may be a revealing case. I've never actually downloaded and had to use that app that shows green or red. Let me back up a second. There's other apps too. There's one that basically proves that you've been in the country for more than 14 days, which you get at the border. And I've had to use that when I go to government offices and when I've entered some compounds. But I've actually never had to show my green or red code because my version of WeChat is too old to use it. And it's very interesting that on the one hand, policies can be very strict, and from very far, from Europe or America, China may seem very strict, but there's also holes in implementation in many things. It could also be that, I don't obviously look foreign, so I think the foreigners on this panel might agree that there's more suspicion these days of people who obviously look foreign, that they may be virus carriers, that there may be more strictness with them. But I think my case here is, quite revealing that implementation is not always perfect. In regards to privacy, I think it's very interesting. We all think of China as being a country where people don't care about privacy. And I think, compared to the West, that's definitely true. But another question you can ask yourselves is that something special about China, or is that something special about Europe? I'm an American, and we have fewer data protections than you do. We didn't have GDPR, and Europe, the EU, had that, regulated Google and Facebook in those ways. So, when Europeans look at China, maybe they're commenting on themselves more than they are about China in some ways, because it's quite a unique experience to care so much about your personal data, especially if you're a prosperous, open country, as the Netherlands has been for hundreds of years. Perhaps you may not be able to stand in the shoes of other countries where these restrictions are seen as necessary for health and security.
Thank you so much, Frank, for sharing this very important insight. And also, Shailene, thank you for joining us. Vitas, we will see you in a bit because it's time for a very special moment in our program. Coco Zhao is here. He's a jazz singer, songwriter, and poet, and he's going to play for us. We are so happy you are here, Coco Zhao. He will bring a jazz improvised version of a Chinese children's song. It's called Making Friends.
Thank you, Zoe. All right. Actually, I'm a little cheating. This song's supposed to be playing with my band together, but they're in China, so I'm going to be singing with the back play. And let's make some friends. 叫我交朋友，找到一个好朋友，敬个礼，握握手，你是我的好朋友。 找啊找啊找朋友，找到一个好朋友，情歌里握握手，你是我的好朋友。找朋友，找到一个好朋友，情歌里握握手，你是我的好朋友。找啊找啊找朋友，找到一个好朋友，情歌里握握手，你是我的好朋友。好朋友，我找到一个好朋友，好朋友，滴滴滴滴，好朋友。好朋友。Thank you. Thank you. 谢谢. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you so much, Coco Zhao. That was really beautiful. Thank you also that you are taking the time to join us in conversation. I think you can put that one down and use the other microphone.
Yeah.
Oh, it felt like it earned a lot of much bigger applause, but it was really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, how come you're here in Amsterdam?
Yeah, I'm gonna cut the long story short. I came to Amsterdam this time in January, just before the pandemic happened. And then I got stuck here. But happily stuck here.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah.
So, and we are happy as well, of course, because you're here with us.
Thank you.
So you are an artist, of course. How did COVID-19, other than you being stuck in Amsterdam, but how does it affect your work?
Well, it does affect my work tremendously. I was going to South Africa. I was supposed to go into South Africa, Cape Town Jazz Festival in March, and also some other gigs in Denmark, Copenhagen in the end of February. Israel, all these gigs or festivals are all gone. But gladly, I think artists always trying to find the way to fight through. So I've been doing a lot of practicing at home and online live streams with a few musician friends I have here. There are some local, some from China, and gladly we could be able to get together. I mean, not a lot of people, but just 2, sometimes 3 to make music together. And at the same time, I started my online teaching program in China, which that kept me quite busy. I think right now the online teaching somehow took a big space of my work because everybody cannot go out. So online teaching became quite popular somehow. So I try to keep myself busy with all the alternative possibilities.
Yeah, I like how you phrased it, that also being an artist also means that you have to be creative and flexible.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk on about this topic in the final part of our program. And I'm very happy that are joining us from Shanghai, Karen Smith, Artistic Director and Chief Curator of the Shanghai Center of Photography. Nunu Kong, independent producer, performing artist and choreographer. And also Vitas Jankauskas is still with us. Welcome all of you. Karen, I'm going to start with you. So you are the Artistic Director and Chief Curator of the Shanghai Center of Photography. Can you tell us a little bit about the institution and how COVID-19 impacted SCOP?
Yes, thank you very much for having me here. It's great to be with you. So we founded the Photo Center in 2015, and we're very much looking forward to this year because it was to be our 5th anniversary. And of course, a lot of events were supposed to kick off around April and May, which was the time when we were actually just allowed to start opening again. So we're a very small institution, but we like to think on the West Bund, right near where the new Pompidou Center is. So we're right in the heart of what is a burgeoning cultural district, and it's really developed a lot in the last 5 years. And a lot of that is seeing a community being built there because we now have a lot of residential areas around us too. So it's become a very busy place. But of course, after the Chinese New Year, with everything closed down, it became a very deserted place. And actually one of the areas just adjoining where we are, which is often used for like the AI conference here and also for the West Bund Art Fair and other large events, was actually assigned to be like an overflow quarantine area should it be needed. So there was a lot of kind of activity around preparing that should it be required. And of course, happily, it wasn't. So for a long time, we were closed. We were supposed to open a new exhibition just after the Chinese New Year. And luckily, we had, it's an international touring exhibition called Beyond Fashion. And that we'd already imported the works. So when we were allowed to open again, we were fortunate in being able to put on a brand new exhibition. The museums, like the classical museums, were the first to open in the city. And these are kind of much larger buildings. So it was easier for them to manage the assigned volume of visitors which were allowed in each day, which was capped at 500. But 500 people in a several thousand square meter museum space is very different from inside our space, which is 500 square meters. So I think we have a photo. I can't see the photos, but if they're rolling,
they're definitely rolling. They're rolling, Karen.
Outside, yeah. So, well, the first thing we did, because we're all about photography, and our slogan for the institution is about how to use photography to start a new conversation in China. When I first came here back in the 1990s, very few people were able to take photographs because, of course, we didn't have smartphones or anything like that. So to see today the fact that, almost everybody we know is taking multiple numbers of photographs each day and sharing those images. It's become a language that we really communicate with. But how we communicate and what it means to read a photograph is something that was a real opportunity given to us by being locked down. We started a series called Home But Not Alone, and we asked people, we started with photographers, but then we also asked other creatives and people within our kind of community to show us through photographs how they were living their daily life. And this became a really nice way to share because we didn't need to talk too much. Everybody was doing a lot of work online. And while it was good to have the opportunity to put a lot of art online, it's not the best experience for looking at art, and it felt a little bit frivolous for some of us to just be talking about art at a time when people were really suffering in ways. But at least photography allowed us somehow to share the experiences, and it proved to be tremendously popular. So that's something that we would continue. And also to have events like this today. Of course, China has gone very quickly into very high-end technologies and being able to use online systems. And of course, 5G will allow for so much more to happen. But I think the prevalence of online mechanisms like Zoom, here we're using Team, really allowed us to open up conversations across borders that we'd never really had before. Of course, we knew it was possible. People have been using Skype for years. But to actually be able to have conversations that could be live streamed, that people could join, and bring together people in different parts of the world. The time difference often makes it challenging, but we were having conversations that we wouldn't normally be having. And I think that that's been a really important part of what we've discovered during this period. And I think that in a way, it's allowed us to really exchange views. We talked before about being part of a very globalized world, but I think a lot of the reactions that have happened around the world, to the virus, but also to other kind of senses of alienation that have been experienced, that we've seen coming up. I guess America is a big example of that now. We're able to kind of talk about things and break down borders in a way that I think that we had known that we could do but hadn't really utilized before. And I think this is a very positive outcome of what's been happening so far.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, definitely. And Vitas, you're also still with us. So you're of the Kronos Art Center in New Media Art. Do you recognize what Karen has just told about the impact of COVID-19 on your institute?
Totally. So we, especially in March, when the virus or the curve of the virus started overlapping across the world, our main curator, Janga, he had this idea of where he just shot an email to various institutions, known institutions of media art around the world, and said, let's do an online exhibition where we all kind of show solidarity. And actually, it was quite interesting because a lot of these institutions responded almost immediately. And so we, under Kronos, we united the Rhizome at the New Museum. I think V2 Lab from the Netherlands was also part of it, and Art Center Nabi in South Korea. And then there were various from Switzerland to across Europe, the US, and various parts of the world. We kind of co-joined and did this small exhibition. I think in the photos there should be an image, which is called We Link, and it's still online and you can visit it. And I think that we also surfed onwards that wave of just saying, okay, uncertain times are coming. And what we see now in the world is that the internet is kind of reshaping the ways we live and talk to each other. And maybe, when the virus is over, we're going to abandon all those devices and come back to the ways we used to communicate, or maybe not. Maybe it's going to permanently change some things. And so we decided to set the internet as this year's topic for the whole center. We already kicked off with one small event called the Internet Yamiichi, which is originating from Japan, which is a sort of internet-inspired fair. So we had this very small event last weekend, which was physical. And then we're also going to, in partnership with Duke Kunshan University here in China, which is a sort of a remote satellite of Duke in the US, we're going to do an art residency. So we're collaborating on a residency which bears the topic of worldwide what. So sort of what is going to become out of the internet when we start making sense of all this situation? So we just kind of have this, I don't know, this idea of to live the internet this year at Kronos and kind of do a series of things. But what came out of it is really this, as Karen was mentioning, this sort of communication, like instant communication with people with whom we always knew we could talk, but we never did. And this immediate response and solidarity between the field of media art, which is still relevantly young and sort of indie, if you want. Yeah.
Thank you, Vitas. Nunu Kong, also welcome to the program. Independent producer, performing artist, and choreographer. Can you tell us a little bit about your work?
I've been living and working in Shanghai since 2004, so I'm not Shanghainese, not raised here, and it has been an experience, quite a love and a pain experience with this city, Shanghai. So, but I stop here about my situation right now, and can I just say something that I feel it's important to say right now?
Sure.
First of all, I want to thank my friend Ian Yang from DutchCulture for asking me to join this live cast. And I know you are somewhere in the room right now listening.
Yes, he definitely is. And
yeah,
waving. He's waving.
Yeah, and I appreciate your reconnecting with me, man. It's been a long time. And also my thanks to DutchCulture for including me in this online shared experience and with all the guests tonight. So, and nice meeting you, Zoe.
Nice meeting you. But can you tell me a little bit about the projects you are doing and your work?
Okay, just make a story short. I have been working independently. I mean, I identify myself. That's written on my biography. I am an independent artist. Yes, I produce project for dance, produce project for music, for film. And all this also defends that, also, I am a freelancer who holds no institution, company, no staff, and a little bit more, a single female with no children. So my work, because we're in this topic about crows, so I've been thinking about what has this cove situation influenced my work. So, and I'm thinking, besides some of my performances has been postponed, and just recently 2 of my applications that I worked on it for a month that I submitted to the city and the national foundations where I was trying to get some funds were all failed. But besides that, I don't think there has been a major impact brought by. Okay, let me rephrase it. Yes, because the cove, the probability, the odds, the chance of my international cooperation has been reduced. And some of my jobs that I could earn income from, like teaching in school, has become a distant echo. But as a freelancer who has been used to living in an uncertainty state of freelancing lifestyle, and as an independent artist who has a clue to what the word independent meant to me, that I will have to depend on myself for the most of the time. So even though we are still in the state of the pandemic, and yet I think my story can't or shouldn't end there.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting in how you told that to us. So the difficult thing is happening right now because we're very pressed on time and the next program is already lining up. So unfortunately, I had a follow-up question for all three of you, but because of the time, I have to go on to Chen Yuang, who's, I think, still with us, to ask her also a question with your inspirational words from this part before her. So Chen, thank you very much for staying with us. We were wondering, with your own experience as an independent curator and researcher with a close eye on social issues, what kind of legacy will the COVID-19 leave for artistic practice?
I just heard the stories of and personal experiences of different friends in Shanghai who happened to be back to Shanghai in March or so. And I was back to Shanghai, in fact, after traveling in India for a couple of weeks and months. Because of the coronavirus, I was staying longer than I scheduled. So when I'm back from Delhi on March the 15th, that's the beginning of the end of the story in Shanghai, but the beginning of the beginning of the lockdown in India. And the India situation is still getting not really better after 2-3 months. So I think the challenge is both very local and also very international. And by international, I mean that the more we go into a certain kind of life experience in a very local level, and if we happen to be lucky enough and to find this channel to this locality, then maybe the kind of international vision to be shared and common ground to be met and the reality to be faced with and the challenge to be dealt with together, this chance can be bigger. Also importantly in the art and creativity field. So I think to do things firstly truthful to the local experience and at the same time be at the same time naturally connected to other localities will be very useful, whatever kind of urban, rural, collective or individualistic practice we are doing. So I think the more preparation we did in daily, the more we might contribute to others in terms of crisis, and especially after the crisis. I think in the case of Shanghai, the crisis has just started, and it will last for very long. And we don't know how people on grassroots level will deal with it, and including ourselves, we are also within we are sharing the same situation. And I think it is this context that make possible a meaningful art and creativity.
Thank you very much, Jen Jong, for staying with us and for being our guest today. And also many thanks to Karen Smith, Nunu Kong, and Vitas Jankauskas for sharing your insights. So it's time to wrap up the program, but I'm very happy that still sitting next to me is Coco Xiao. So could you give the audience a take-home message before we close off?
I would say try to stay safe and stay strong and make the best out of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, esteemed guests and audience, for your digital presence today. And also many thanks to Pakhuis de Zwijger and DutchCulture for bringing about these series. So you can watch back the latest editions on New York City, Jakarta, Sao Paulo, Moscow and Cairo, or rewatch this edition on the Pakhuis de Zwijger website or on YouTube. DutchCulture will also write an article about all the individual programs on their website. Next Thursday, we will meet again, and then we will talk more about the current situation in Johannesburg, South Africa. Have a nice evening or night and stay healthy.